Support for this podcast and the following message come from Dignity Memorial. When your celebration of life is prepaid today, your family is protected tomorrow. Planning ahead is truly one of the best gifts you can give your family. For additional information, visit dignitymemorial.com.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident.
The business of incarceration and of detention, everywhere from the coyote to Dr. Phil's ratings. I think it's important to look at who is making that money.
I'm just absorbing what you just said.
I can't with Dr. Phil.
Yes.
Sorry. There's something like almost Orwellian about like Dr. Phil interviewing migrants.
But you've never been deported before?
Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil.
Yeah? How do you know me?
Yes, you heard that right. Dr. Phil was in Chicago interviewing someone who was actively being arrested by ICE. This was a part of a ride-along operation with Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, amidst the president's much-promised crackdown on immigration. Now, there's been so much action in the president's first few days in office. It's been hard to keep up with the flurry of executive orders he's signed, but there was one in particular that set off alarm bells that could fundamentally change the definition of who's American.
We're the only country in the world that does this with birthright, as you know.
That's not true. Canada does that. Mexico does that. There's other countries who do this.
You know, a lot of his executive actions that we've seen, the goal, it's to deter and to limit people from wanting to migrate to the United States at all.
An executive order aimed at changing who gets birthright citizenship. Now, birthright citizenship is protected by the Constitution and guarantees U.S. citizenship to any child born on U.S. soil, with the exception of very specific groups like, say, the children of foreign diplomats. It dates back to the period after the Civil War, when the 14th Amendment was revised to include all persons born or naturalized in the United States. It granted citizenship to newly emancipated Black Americans. And since then, it's changed the face of our nation.
The idea was determining who could and could not be American. I think there's this very similar push of wanting to determine what America looks like and who gets to be here and who gets to stay here.
There have been several attempts to challenge the rule. In fact, this isn't even the first time President Trump has tried to roll it back.
During Trump 1.0, his first administration, he said he was going to do this. The order never came down. And so since then, we have seen the idea of abolishing birthright citizenship move from this kind of like fringe idea into a little bit more of the main stage of the Republican Party during the election.
And even though a federal judge has already blocked President Trump's order, getting the order to stand might not have been the point at all.
The question that keeps coming up for me as a reporter over and over again is, what if the fear is the message?
My guests, NPR's immigration correspondent, Jasmine Garsd.
Hi.
And NPR's Homeland Security Department and immigration policy reporter, Jimena Bustillo.
Hey.
Are here to break down what the battle for birthright says about our nation and who is already cashing in.
I think it's not just about who gets to stay here. It's also about who gets to live a life in peace here. And this sort of like permanent underclass that we have established, which goes back in history a very long time.
The racial dynamics of this are hard to ignore. When I think about the popularity of like the white replacement theory, you know, this idea that there is a plot to, quote, replace white Americans with people of color. I mean, this used to be a fringe alt-right theory, but we've seen members of the GOP embrace elements of the, you know, white replacement theory. I don't know, when I look at like the context in which all of these ICE arrests and this birthright citizenship discourse is happening, it's very difficult not to see some kind of connection there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely complicated. I do remember covering the campaign in Ohio, actually, in Springfield, Ohio, and speaking to someone from the local Republican chapter and talking very earnestly about the labor shortage in America and, how, why aren't we framing this as there's a severe labor shortage and we have people who are coming in who want to work desperately. This woman told me, well, yes, that's why we need to regulate abortion laws. We need to start having babies. And I think that for me was like this aha moment of, right, this is all part of this.
I also was out and about covering the campaign quite a bit. And, I think it's also important to remember that for a lot of the average voter, when you ask them if you really thought that mass deportations were going to happen, if their workers were at risk of being deported, they would say no. They would say that they didn't think that that was really happening and that it was all rhetoric and tough talk. Now we're kind of in a position where we're seeing if that tough talk is going to materialize and whether or not people's lives are affected and changed because of that, including the ones who voted for the president.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that makes this even more complicated, which Jimena has done some great reporting on, is the Latino vote. Like how many Latinos voted for immigrants, many Latino immigrants, to go through this. There's really been this schism. And something that I always remind people is that Latin America is a deeply stratified place with deep color lines. And I think that the fact that this carried over should not be a surprise to anyone, any Latino, and any student of history.
If it were to happen, what's the administration plan to replace birthright citizenship with?
I think the thing to focus on is that this is really, really, really unlikely. There is a really long road ahead before there is a reinterpretation of the Constitution that can imagine a world in which the United States does not grant birthright citizenship in the way that the status quo says that it does.
The question that keeps coming up for me as a reporter over and over again is, what if the point is the fear and keeping this perma underclass that is afraid, that is unable to accumulate any kind of stability or wealth? I've been hearing from factory workers in Nebraska, where I just was. They see the ICE agents, they bow their head down, and they go to work quietly. I think that is the concern here, that maybe these grandstanding, bombastic proposals are not meant to go through. I don't know. I could be wrong. But what if the fear is the message, much like we've seen in past years and in past centuries?
There are so many other ways in which, as you say, that fear it can keep someone's head bowed. It can also keep someone from being able to provide safely and consistently for their families. But it also can keep people from perhaps pushing for other causes that are important to them, that they see as a matter of equitable treatment, that they see as a matter of civil or human rights as well.
Yeah, and it's not just about people and their ability to voice their beliefs. I think that there is a very tangible impact that we saw even during the first Trump administration with public charge. The ability to access public benefits like nutrition assistance programs, right? There were plenty of people who were in the middle of the green card process or other type of naturalization process that forewent benefits because they were afraid that whoever was giving them the final stamp of approval would decide that they had been a charge on the public, a burden to society, and therefore not worthy of being a citizen or not worthy of being a legal permanent resident. And, that was a really big problem at the start of COVID when there were a lot of organizations that wanted to make sure people were getting tested, that people were, comfortable going to medical facilities, were comfortable asking for unemployment if they needed it. And so if you already have a track record of deeming a certain class of people as a public charge, I've had many advocates and organizations tell tell me that that's enough to block access. And, that doesn't even touch levels of advocacy, whether it's unionizing on your farm, whether it is being able to stand up for other causes. That is your ability to put food on the table and get medical care.
Coming up,
almost every undocumented immigrant family that I have spoken to has told me, you know what prepared me for this? The Obama years.
how the Democrats disenchanted a generation of voters and prepared them for Trump 2.0.
This message comes from Schwab. At Schwab, how you invest is your choice, not theirs. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices. You can invest and trade on your own. Plus, get advice and more comprehensive wealth solutions to help meet your unique needs. With award-winning service, low costs, and transparent advice, you can manage your wealth your way at Schwab. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
This message comes from CarMax. CarMax knows that finding the right car is all about exploring your options, like the option to shop your way on your schedule. At CarMax, you can browse, compare, and pre-qualify online, then finish up at the store, or simply start on the lot. The choice is yours, because at CarMax, you're in the driver's seat. Start the search for your next car today at CarMax, the way car buying should be. This message comes from Thuma. Create your oasis with Thuma, a modern design company that specializes in furniture and home goods. By stripping away everything but the essential, Thuma makes elevated beds with premium materials and intentional details. With clean lines, subtle curves, and minimalist style, the Thuma bed collection is available in 4 signature finishes to match any design aesthetic. To get $100 towards your first bed purchase, go to thuma.co/NPR. This message comes from Intuit TurboTax. Now, taxes is matching with an expert backed by tech to get you the most money back at TurboTax.com. Experts only available with TurboTax Live. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Regardless of whether birthright citizenship is abolished or not, a lot stands to accelerate in terms of America's immigration enforcement in the coming months. I wonder what industries are profiting from America's immigration crackdown and which ones might stand to profit in the future.
I mean, obviously, there is an enormous detention industrial complex. I mean, and we are seeing that. I don't believe it should be seen any different from the prison industrial complex. I mean, there is so much money to be made, you know? I was recently at the border, and on the Mexico side, I interviewed a coyote. That's the guy who you pay him a lot of money, he sneaks you into the U.S. And I told him, how do you feel about the Trump administration coming in? And his response was, it's going to be great for business. I mean, the business of incarceration and of detention, everywhere from the coyote to Dr. Phil's ratings. I think it's important to look at who is making that money.
I'm just absorbing what you just said.
I can't with Dr. Phil. Sorry,
Yes, Dr. Phil was a sneak in there. I was like, okay, yeah, good point.
There's something like almost Orwellian about like Dr. Phil interviewing migrants. And I think it is important to look very critical at the industry, all the industries around this, including an entertainment. And frankly, I mean, it's been like kind of an entertainment machinery around this, right?
Yeah, the messaging has come on very strong in a way that the Biden administration simply completely stayed away from the issue. And that's something that former Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was honest about when he spoke to NPR.
Right, Biden's Secretary of Homeland Security.
I don't think we prevailed in communicating to the American people successfully the challenges of migration at an historic level since World War II.
They didn't talk about immigration, and they didn't talk about what they were doing on immigration or border security to the point where it's kind of seen as one of their weaker parts during the 2024 presidential election.
Yeah.
As Trump was talking about border security and was talking about immigration, taking very, very hardline stances, there wasn't necessarily anything to counter that. And the border crossing numbers went up and went down and up and down, as they normally do during any administration. But the Biden administration just really did not counter the narrative that they were failing at the border. And so when you take that and you compare it to now the full court press of, media attention, of activity on social media sites from government handles, from different press availabilities, we're seeing Border Czar Tom Homan on TV, and that's not an accident.
We've discussed this big moment in messaging from Trump and his administration and the Republican Party around, cracking down on immigration. But this is something that Democrats also have done as well.
Yeah.
I mean, some people have referred to Obama as the deporter in chief. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of comparison between how Trump is handling things and how Biden has handled things, with the assumption that Trump has deported more people or detained more people than Obama or Biden has.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's the immediate comparison of Trump to Biden because you always compare a sitting president to their predecessor.
Sure.
But I think the important thing to remember is that this Trump administration, it's a baby. It's a few weeks old. They have 4 years to go. And so a lot of the big comparisons of what the Trump administration is able to do, who it is that they're targeting, and how that differs to previous administrations, we're not going to be able to do that for several months.
And I would also say among who? Like, among who is that comparison non-existence? I definitely agree that in the mainstream discourse,
yes,
it might be unpopular to talk about President Obama as the deporter in chief. Almost every undocumented immigrant family that I have spoken to has told me, you know what prepared me for this? The Obama years. And I think also when we're talking about, I know there were a lot of elements to, voter kind of disenchantment and disengagement in the last election. But definitely speaking to children of immigrants, something that I noticed was this kind of disenchantment with Democrats. We were told to vote between less cruel and more cruel when it came to immigrant rights. So I would argue that it is a comparison that is made, maybe perhaps not at a mainstream level, but definitely in immigrant family kitchens, that discussion is happening. And I also think a lot of the conversation about this has lacked nuance, I think. And it is a conversation I think we're starting to have, which is, how do you talk about a person of color or a group of people of color who vote for something that is not good for a lot of other people of color, right? And I think we saw that with Latino voters. And I think it is hard, for a lot of people to talk about a president like Barack Obama, who is very beloved for a group of people. And it's hard to talk about that with nuance. And I don't know if that's something that might be kind of controversial to say, but I think that's a hard conversation for a lot of people.
There's going to be people listening to this conversation who think that this has nothing to do with them, that they, as American-born citizens with American-born parents, don't have to think or worry about birthright citizenship or increased ICE arrests. What would you say to them?
I got a message from a listener recently, and the message said they knew the risk they were taking. We let them stay here for a while, and now it's time for them to go back. And I got it around the same time as I was hanging out with this family that's been here for 30 years. If someone is here for 30 years, that person and their family and their children and their grandchildren is now part of the fabric of American society. They have bought houses, pay taxes, children are citizens, grandchildren are citizens. And so I think this kind of black and white, get people out, is just not in tune with the reality of the situation. I think regardless of how you feel, the United States is inextricably linked with immigrants, whether it's labor, whether it's families. You can't pull on that string and expect that things won't fall apart.
Jasmine, Jimena, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with us about this. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was NPR immigration correspondent Jasmine Garsd and Homeland Security Department and immigration policy reporter Jimena Bustillo. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Alexis Williams,
Barton Girdwood.
This episode was edited by
Jasmine Romero.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Boll & Branch. Change your sleep with the softness of Boll & Branch's 100% organic cotton sheets. Feel the difference with 15% off your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code NPR. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
This message comes from eBay. Swapping out your tires? Cool! With eBay, you find the feel you're looking for, from smooth highway rides to grip for rough terrain. Get all the tires you need at prices you'll love. eBay. Things people love.
This message comes from Intuit. Need a software solution to simplify the complexities of your growing business? Transform how you manage with Intuit Enterprise Suite's powerful automation and core suite of tools for financial management, payment processing, payroll, HR, bill pay, marketing, and third-party integrations. It's how a growing business keeps growing. Visit intuit.com/enterprise to learn more. Money movement services by Intuit Payments, Inc., licensed by NYDFS.